Hello, I am Tom McRae. This is Al Jazeera, and if you are just joining us, you're watching our special coverage of the coronation of the UK's King Charles III. He has been officially crowned along with his wife, now Queen Camilla, in a ceremony filled with pomp and pageantry at Westminster Abbey in London. He's now making his way back to Buckingham Palace. Well, every coronation is meant to reflect the time in which it takes place, from the words used in the service, the people that have been invited, to, of course, what we see, and, of course, the person who is being crowned. Every detail of the service, and today, has been long thought over by the King and the Palace. We'll dive into the details of the service and what sort of King Charles may be in just a moment, but we're going to go to Jonah Hull, who is standing by for us outside Buckingham Palace. And Jonah, is the crowd there, obviously with the King and the Queen about to make their way towards you, is the crowd getting what they turned up for?
Well, I think, as I was saying to you earlier, mercifully for the crowd gathered here in front of Buckingham Palace and all along the Mall and that procession route, the rain stopped pretty much as soon as the King exited Westminster Abbey along with the Queen Consort Camilla and got on board that gold state coach for this procession. And what a mercy that is. They've sat through the pouring rain through the entirety of the coronation service. Now they can look forward to the highlight of the day without ponchos covering them and umbrellas blocking their view. And as I speak, and I'm sure you can see behind me here, elements of the sort of front section of this procession making their way towards the end of the procession, Buckingham Palace, what looks to have been several elements of the armed forces of Commonwealth countries and British overseas territories, of course, all represented here along with all the services of the UK armed forces. And of course, you can hear behind me the sounds of a marching band, one of 19 marching bands taking part in this procession. And as it reaches the front, the gold state coach looks to be heading towards Admiralty Arch and towards the top end of the Mall. Yep, turning round out of Whitehall, heading towards Admiralty Arch for the final stretch. Buckingham Palace will now be in view of the King and Queen, and they will complete the final lap, the entirety of the Mall now full of that procession, making for what will be some extraordinary aerial photography later. And in perhaps 15 or so minutes, they're going at walking pace, these bands beating out a pace of 108 steps a minute. That is about walking pace. It's as fast as that ancient gold coach can go. In about 15 minutes, they will enter Buckingham Palace and they will enter to a royal salute of several thousand armed service personnel gathered in the palace gardens. And then the royal family, behind the coach there, the Prince and Princess of Wales and their children, will have some time off inside Buckingham Palace before they appear. I'll step aside and just show it. Where is it? There it is. You can possibly make it out there. The balcony, red velvet clad balcony over there, which is where they will appear about 45 minutes later to greet the crowds, of course, in what will be perhaps the most famous moment of the day. And it rather looks as though the crowds are clearing enough for a royal fly past as well.
Of course. Obviously, for the tens and tens of thousands of people, the majority of them that have turned up and braved the weather over the last few hours, this will be a momentous day. But I'm just wondering, has this been a contentious coronation, or has it united the United Kingdom, do you think?
So, Hale, I'm struggling, frankly, to hear what you're saying. Will you have another go at that?
Of course. Has this been a contentious coronation, or has this united the United Kingdom, do you think?
Gosh, well, I mean, I suspect time will tell. I mean, there's certainly nothing contentious about it where I'm standing amongst some of the most hardened fans of the monarchy who've gone to great lengths and efforts to be here to witness this moment. Elsewhere, if the opinion polls are to be believed, there is quite a great deal of apathy out there towards this event. It is unclear, and we may find out, of course, in time, but it is unclear just how many people will actually be gathered around their TV sets watching this moment, just how many people actually consider this moment to be of great importance in their lives, as opposed to great importance perhaps economically or as a tourist attraction. I mean, I think there is a big question about the sort of monarchy that moves forward with King Charles. We've been hearing lots of analysis about it over the last couple of hours on our programmes. It is a monarchy that he, the king, would like to be seen as reforming, as slimming down, as costing the state purse much less, a monarchy more accessible, more inclusive, more modern and forward-looking. And yet it is still a monarchy that is holding a coronation, the only religious coronation held by any monarchy anywhere in the world, that is costing the public purse an estimated $130 million at a time when King Charles himself is estimated to be worth $2 billion or more. There are all sorts of questions over the relevance of this institution, over its continued popularity among the public. Older people like it, yes. Younger people, not so much.
OK, thank you so much. That is Jonah Hull for us outside Buckingham Palace. We will come back to you throughout the next hour or so as events continue there. We're going to go now to Linda Porter, who has been with us over the last few hours. She's a royal historian, and she also joins us live from London. Linda, I want to ask you, I mean, there's obviously no legal requirement to hold a coronation on this scale. I mean, he would still be king if there hadn't been this hugely lavish ceremony. Can you just explain to people that might be watching on and wondering why the UK is going through this and spending the amount of money, more than $100 million, on this ceremony? Can you explain why today is so important?
I think it's important because it gives us a focus at what, as some of your other commentators have quite rightly said, have been and still are troubled times. And it takes away some of the drabness and the difficulty that people are in nowadays and gives them something that is superbly orchestrated, because while, as my fellow commentator Christopher said earlier on, it is undoubtedly true that the United Kingdom's position is diminished in the world for various reasons. But I think this kind of ceremony and the ritual that underlies it and the general spectacle of it can bring people out of themselves and give them something that, even if it's only for a day or two, something that they can be pleased with. I'm not sure how much it affects national pride. Undoubtedly it will do for some people, and as has been pointed out, they may be mostly older people. But I think almost anybody watching this is going to be impressed by the way it is conducted, the response of the crowds in unpleasant weather situation here in London. We've been terribly unlucky in our last two coronations before this even, and Elizabeth II was even more pouring rain than this one has been. And you would think that dampens enthusiasm, but certainly amongst those watching it clearly doesn't. Now, perhaps they are not representative of the country as a whole, but I don't think this country is done with monarchy yet. And if it is to survive, it has to tread this awkward tightrope between having these kind of ceremonies and doing them superbly and making people feel that they are part of something memorable and special, because, you know, people who have lined the routes today will remember this, and perhaps it sounds slightly corny, but they will tell their grandchildren in due course. And I think that's good for the country as a whole at a time that is still difficult. You've got to remember the last coronation, we were just coming out, really, of the Second World War. There was still some degree of rationing. I can remember my mother's ration book for going to get sweets and things like that. And that was a time of difficulty as well. perhaps then we felt we had more to look forward to. But if this can bring people together and make them feel that they have something to look forward to, with a king who perhaps does want to reform an institution that no doubt, as it has done through the centuries, needs reforming. It may be that we end up with a monarchy that is much more like the monarchies in Europe, in the Netherlands, in Belgium, in the Scandinavian countries. And I personally don't think that would be any bad thing. And it is not necessarily a loss to monarchy as an institution. It is just a change that perhaps it needs to go through.
Well, there's absolutely no doubt that the United Kingdom does this arguably better than anyone else, put on an event like this, of this scale. And as you can hear, I'm sure there is certainly a lot of passion from the tens of thousands of people that have turned out. You can hear the cheers as the gold state carriage takes King Charles and Queen Camilla along the Mall back to Buckingham Palace, and along with the other royals as part of the royal family. I just want to go back to the service, if I could, Linda, and just the moment, if you could talk us through the moment that he was crowned and God Save the King was proclaimed. Can you explain the weight of that moment for Charles the man, but also for the United Kingdom and the Commonwealth?
Well, for Charles the man, it's something he's waited for all his life, really, isn't it? As he himself has pointed out, he became heir to the throne at the age of 4, an age in which you can't necessarily really comprehend what this means. And then, of course, he's been waiting for it for all of the rest of his life. And I think many of us who are about the same age as the king, which I am, might view this as very daunting, but also as something that is a fulfilment of a life spent in preparation for that moment. What it means for the Commonwealth, I'm not so sure. As Christopher Wilson said earlier on, there are understandable signs that a good many of the existing Commonwealth countries have no personal animosity towards Charles III, but just don't view their situation vis-à-vis him as being particularly relevant. And again, that is not necessarily a disaster. It is a necessary phase of moving on and countries developing their own identities and their own relationships with the United Kingdom. For the country as a whole, here, coming at a time of, the end of a period, hopefully, towards the end of a period of great difficulty. It comes, only yesterday the World Health Organization didn't precisely declare COVID over, but that an emergency situation perhaps no longer existed. And I think it is perhaps uplifting for the country and a necessary form of relief almost from what have been some very, very hard years, some for political reasons which a number of us think could and should have been avoided, and others globally over which we had no control. So to have a day like this, even if the weather is rotten, which it is, it is at least a break in a period that has not been one in which there has been much to celebrate or smile about. So I hope it will be good for the country as a whole.
Indeed. What does King Charles need to do next? I guess to keep the momentum from the coronation going. And is there anything planned in the weeks or months ahead to do that?
Well, I have to say I don't really know the answer to that question, but I'm sure that in his own mind he has a view of the necessary way forward. I mean, there have already been some hints of this, the giving of bigger roles to the Prince and Princess of Wales. I think that no doubt he would wish to heal the splits in the royal family, but there have always been splits in royal families. This goes back centuries. The current press and media make a great deal of it because they have an opportunity to sell newspapers and generally promote themselves through it. But it's something of a minor aspect of the royal family, though I've no doubt that Charles would wish to try and heal breaches with Prince Harry if he could. And I was rather actually pleased to see some TV coverage of Harry, at the ceremony and coming out afterwards, in which he looked, I thought, fairly relaxed and positive. That, I'm sure, is something that will prey on the King's mind. How he takes his reign forward in terms of the country, I don't know. His own personal interests we all know about.
Yes.
And many of them have been, to some degree, related in the coronation in the way that the ceremony was structured and the people who were involved in it. And I suppose on a national scale, he will want to try and continue demonstrating the fact that he understands that we are a multicultural society and that we are diverse and that there is nothing to be gained by clinging